The loudest screams are often silent. Think about that for a second, my friends. It's not always the person yelling that is in pain. Sometimes the most broken person in the room is the one who has stopped talking altogether, the one who goes quiet, who doesn't explain or beg anymore. That's the person you should be worried about, because silence is not weakness. It's not surrender, it's strategy. And more often than not, it's the final move before transformation. Before we dive into this profound truth, do me a favor. If you've ever been the one who chose silence instead of drama, the one who walked away with dignity instead of staying to prove your worth, hit that like button and subscribe, because what you're about to hear is going to shift something deep inside you. Fire. And I want you with me for the entire journey, so stay with me now. Hey folks, imagine this. You're in a burning house. The flames are everywhere. You can barely breathe, but you're still in there screaming someone's name, trying to drag them out. They see you, they hear you, but they stay seated like they're invincible, like they've got all the time in the world. So one day you stop yelling. You stop reaching. You walk out of the fire without a word. You don't slam the door. You don't throw one last fit. You just disappear into the night and leave nothing but silence behind. And guess what? That silence echoes louder than any final goodbye ever could. Because they weren't expecting it. They were expecting you to blow up, to cry, to chase. But when you gave them nothing, they were left with everything they tried to avoid. Their own guilt, their own ego, their own reflection. People don't realize how heavy silence can be until they hear it in the dead of night. Until they check their phone and see no missed calls. Until they scroll through your page and see no sad quotes, no cries for attention, just silence. It hits them in waves, first confusion, then discomfort, then panic, because silence doesn't tell them where they stand with you, and the human mind hates the unknown. They wanted control. They thrived on your reactions. But now your silence is starving their ego. It's taking away their favorite meal, your energy. The Stoic philosopher Seneca once said, "Sometimes even to live is an act of courage." Well, today, my friends, choosing silence when you could have chosen anger, that's courage, that's strength, that's the kind of power that speaks without making a sound, and it breaks every illusion they've built about you. They told themselves you'd always be there, that no matter how far they pushed you, you'd pull harder, that no matter how many times they hurt you, you'd keep proving your worth. But silence proved something else entirely. Let me break a lie for you right now. They didn't leave because you were weak. They left because they thought you were easy to get back. They thought you'd be waiting right where they left you. But when they finally come back, hoping to replay the same game, they're going to find a different scene. You're not sitting in the ashes anymore. You've built something new with your peace, your silence, your growth. You didn't lose them. They lost access to a version of you that no longer exists, because silence is the storm after the fire. It's the quiet after the chaos. It's not just the absence of words, it's the presence of self-respect. It's the most powerful way to say, "You no longer get to hurt me," without saying anything at all. And when someone realizes that you're not being silent to punish them, but because you've outgrown the need to be heard by them, that's when it truly hits. So if you're sitting in silence right now, wondering if they feel it, let me tell you. They do. Every second, every scroll, every time they expect your name to pop up and it doesn't, it stings. Because silence isn't distance, it's a decision. A decision to choose yourself. Say it with me right now, my friends. Silence is power. Write it in the comments. Let them feel your absence. Let your silence speak volumes. And if you're ready to stop explaining your worth and start standing in it like the video, subscribe and stay with me. This is just the beginning. 1. Why your silence hurts more than words. Silence isn't empty, it's full of answers. Most people don't understand that. They think silence is weakness. That if you're not yelling, crying, or explaining yourself, then you've got nothing left to say. But my friends, silence is the message. It's the loudest thing you'll ever speak without opening your mouth. And to the person who expected you to break that silence, it burns. Let me paint a picture for you. Imagine someone standing in the middle of a boxing ring, fists up, shouting, throwing punches at the air, waiting for a fight. But when the bell rings and they look across the ring, there's no one there, no opponent, no response, just the echo of their own voice bouncing off the walls. That's what your silence feels like to them. They were prepared for battle, but you didn't show up. You walked away quiet and unbothered. And now they're left fighting shadows, haunted by the noise they no longer hear from you. Now the questions start to creep in. Why aren't they texting me? Why haven't they posted anything sad? Are they really done? Or are they trying to teach me a lesson? That silence you gave them, it's not just confusion, it's fear. The fear of not knowing what's going on in your head. The fear of realizing they might not matter as much as they thought they did. The fear that maybe, just maybe, you're better off without them. Because people expect closure. They expect tears. They expect a final message, something they can argue with, something they can dissect. But silence doesn't give them that satisfaction. It leaves them alone with their thoughts, with their guilt, with the reality they've been avoiding. And the human mind doesn't sit quietly in silence. No, it fills in the blanks, and trust me, the imagination is far more brutal than the truth ever could be. The philosopher Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." And your silence, my friends, is that strength. It's choosing to walk away, not with a storm, but with stillness. It's no longer begging for a seat at a table you were overqualified to sit at. It's understanding that your value doesn't need a performance, it just is. But let's be real for a second. Silence isn't easy. It's hard not to explain yourself. It's hard not to defend your heart. There's a part of you that wants to scream, "I cared. I gave you everything," but the truth is, they already know. They just thought you'd never stop, that you'd always be there, always ready to forgive, always picking up the pieces. That's the lie they told themselves, and it's time to break it. They thought your love was guaranteed, that your energy was endless, that no matter how many times they pulled away, you'd chase. But when you finally go silent, that's when their entire story falls apart. That's when they realize they never had control. They only had your kindness. And now that kindness is gone. Your silence isn't about revenge. It's not a game. It's clarity. It's peace. It's the kind of power that doesn't shout. It shines. It's the moment you stop begging them to understand you and start showing the world who you really are without them. And let me tell you this, when someone expects chaos and receives calm, it destroys them. When someone expects you to fall apart and you rise in silence, that's unforgettable. That's haunting. That's power. So if you're in that quiet phase right now, stay there. Let them wonder. Let them scroll through your profile in the dark, looking for signs you still care. Let them read old messages and realize they pushed away someone who only ever wanted to love them. Right? Don't give them closure. Give them silence, and let the silence speak for itself. Say this out loud right now. My silence is my power. Now drop it in the comments below. Show them. Show yourself. Show the world that you're not afraid to walk away without a sound. Because when you learn to speak without words, you become unforgettable. And trust me, what comes next is going to shake everything they thought they knew about you. So stay with me, we're just getting started. 2. They expected drama, but you gave them distance. You don't destroy a person by yelling. You destroy them by no longer reacting. T. That's the one they never see coming. You see, folks, when someone walks out of your life thinking they still have control over your emotions, they expect one thing: drama. They expect a storm, a meltdown, 100 messages, a long thread of emotions poured out just so they can feel important, just so they can look at their phone and say, yep, they still care. But when they pull away and you give them nothing but distance, when you go quiet, not to punish, not to play games, but because you've finally had enough, that's when the shift happens. That's when their expectations shatter. And let me tell you, my friends, that silence is the earthquake beneath their ego. Let me give you a picture. They're standing there with gasoline in one hand and a match in the other. They set fire to the bridge, thinking you'll come running through the flames to pull them back, crying, apologizing, begging to fix it. But instead, they turn around, and the bridge is just gone. Not burnt, not broken, just gone. You didn't wait for the fire. You built a new path and walked the other way. And that's what kills them slowly. Because now they're not in control. They don't get to feed off your reaction. They don't get to feel superior. They don't get to play victim. They expected the usual cycle. Hurt you, get a reaction, feel validated. But this time, you changed the script. You're not in the arena anymore. You've left the stage. You've taken your energy back quietly, calmly, powerfully. Now they're looking around, confused. Why aren't they reacting? Why aren't they posting something sad? Why haven't they texted me back with that long paragraph I know is coming? They start creating reasons in their head. Maybe you're waiting. Maybe you're playing hard to get. But the truth that creeps in slowly, the truth that terrifies them, is that maybe you're done. People like this are addicted to control, not connection. And when you go silent, not to win, not to manipulate, but simply because you've healed enough to walk away, they lose their supply. Their ego starts shaking. Their fantasy crumbles because now they're left alone with themselves. And guess what? That's their worst nightmare. The Stoics understood this deeply. Epictetus once said, "It's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters." So when they hurt you and you don't react, you flip the entire dynamic. You take back control of the only thing that ever mattered, your peace. But here's the honest truth. It's not easy. There's a voice inside you screaming to explain yourself, a fire in your chest that wants to say, "I cared so much. How could you not see it?" There's a moment when you want to type out that long message just to get it out, just to feel seen. But here's what you need to know. They already know. They just didn't care enough to value it. And your silence, it's no longer about making them care. It's about finally caring for yourself. That distance you're giving them, it's not rejection. It's self-respect. It's the line in the sand that says, I'm not here to perform for your ego anymore. You're not proving anything. You're protecting everything now, yourself. And when you hold that silence, when you stay in that space where your absence is louder than any argument, that's when their confidence starts shaking. That's when they realize you were never chasing them, you were choosing them. And now that choice is gone. They expected fireworks. They got emptiness. They expected one more scene. You gave them the credits and left the theater. So if you're sitting in silence right now, feeling like you're losing, you're not. You're rising quietly, powerfully, beautifully. You're becoming untouchable. Say it with me and drop it in the comments. I choose distance over drama. Let it be known, not with noise, but with presence, with peace. Let the world see that you no longer chase the people who run from your worth. And stay with me, because what happens when they feel that distance for too long? Oh, they won't just feel it, they'll break from it. And that's what we're talking about next. 3. The ego starves when you stop explaining. The moment you stop explaining yourself is the moment you take your power back. Let that one sink in. Because for a long time, my friends, you were the one doing all the explaining. You were the one pouring your heart out, trying to make them understand. You were breaking yourself down into little pieces, handing them over like puzzle parts, hoping they'd finally get it, finally get you. But they never did. Or maybe they did. They just didn't care enough to show it. And that's where the ego fed. They got used to your voice, your explanations, your constant efforts to fix what they kept breaking. Every time they ignored your feelings, you wrote paragraphs. Every time they pulled away, you pulled harder. Every time they hurt you, you tried to justify your pain like it needed permission to exist. But then one day, you stopped. You stopped explaining. You stopped proving. You stopped handing them the blueprint to your heart and started protecting what was left of it. Oh. And that right there was the moment their ego started starving. Picture this, a spoiled king who gets served every single day, 3 meals, silver platter, everything handed to him. He gets used to it, doesn't even say thank you, just expects it. Then one morning, the food doesn't show up. No explanation, no warning, just nothing. And now he's pacing the halls. He's angry, he's confused. But most of all, he's hungry. Because when someone's been feeding off your energy for so long, your silence is starvation. Your distance is famine. They weren't listening to your explanations. They were enjoying the control of knowing that no matter what they did, you'd come back with reasons, with apologies, with, I just want you to understand. But when that stops, when you stop giving them the luxury of your emotional labor, they panic. That's the thing about people who feed on ego. They don't crave love, they crave attention. They don't want healing, they want control. And your explanations were fuel, but silent. Silence is a power cut, and they can't function in the dark. Now they start wondering, not about you, but about themselves. Why aren't they reacting? Did I lose my grip? Have they moved on? And suddenly they're not the ones holding power. Without saying a word. You aren't saying a word. But let's be real, I know it's not easy. You've spent so long believing that your pain needs a witness, that if they could just understand what they did, they'd finally change. You thought clarity would bring closure. But sometimes the real closure comes when you realize they understood you. They just didn't care enough to change. And that, my friends, is a brutal truth, one that rips through your chest and leaves silence behind. But guess what? That silence is sacred now. It's your boundary, your armor, your healing. You're no longer throwing pearls to pigs. You're no longer trying to explain storms to people who were never caught in the rain with you. You're letting go of the need to be understood. And that's where real peace begins. The Stoic philosopher Epictetus said, "Don't explain your philosophy. Embody it. You don't need to tell them how much you've grown. Show them. You don't need to write one more paragraph they won't read. Live a life they no longer have access to." You don't need to yell, "Look what you lost." Just let your silence echo through the space they thought they'd always occupy. Because when you stop explaining yourself, something powerful happens. You stop seeking permission to feel. You stop auditioning for someone who never deserved a front row seat in your life. And slowly, piece by piece, you start becoming the person who doesn't beg to be seen. You become the one who chooses who gets to see you. So if your silence is driving someone crazy right now, good. That's not petty. That's not petty. That's peace. That's you reclaiming every ounce of energy you wasted trying to convince someone of your worth. Now you're not explaining. You're evolving. Say it with me right now and write it in the comments. I don't explain myself to those who choose not to understand. Let the world see that you're no longer performing emotional labor for people who can't love past their own ego. Usa. And stay close, because next we're diving into the hidden spiral they enter when your silence becomes the only voice they hear. And trust me, it gets darker than you think. 4. The psychological spiral they enter behind closed doors. Tars. Hell isn't fire. It's replaying the moment they lost you over and over in silence. You see, folks, when you go silent, truly silent, something starts happening behind closed doors that you'll never see. But they will feel it. Deep, quiet, constant. At first, they don't flinch. In fact, they probably feel a little relief. They think your silence is space. They think it's a break. They assume, oh, they'll reach out soon. They always do. That's their ego talking. That's their pride doing the math. It's used to you showing up first. It's counting down the minutes until your name lights up their screen again. But when the minutes turn into hours and the hours turn into days, that's when the shift begins. At first it's a shrug, then it's curiosity, then it's concern, and finally it's fear. Now they're checking your stories, re-watching your last post, scrolling through your feed, trying to find something, a clue, a song lyric, a sad quote, something to confirm you're still hurting, that you're still out there hoping, that you're still attached. Because if you're hurting, then in their mind, they're still important. But what happens when they find nothing? No indirect quotes, no sad pictures, not even a late-night song drop. What happens when your silence is so clean, so cold, so intentional that it doesn't even leave breadcrumbs? That's when the psychological spiral begins. Now they're pacing at 2:00 a.m., asking questions they never prepared to answer. What if they're really done? What if someone else is loving them now? What if I push them too far this time? And my friends, here's the beautiful part. You didn't say a word. You just chose yourself. You just chose peace. But your silence, that silence, has now taken a front row seat in their head, and it's not leaving. And it's living rent-free in every quiet moment. In the shower, on the drive home, in the bed they used to imagine you lying in. Because the ego can ignore words. It can argue with emotions. It can even twist apologies. But it can't decode silence. And when the mind can't decode something, it creates stories, dark stories, painful stories, stories that loop endlessly. This is where the guilt creeps in. They start remembering the way you used to check in, the way you used to forgive them, even when they didn't say sorry, the way you used to fight for the connection, even when they gave you nothing to hold on to. Those moments, they're not just memories now, they're reminders. Reminders of how badly they messed up someone who only ever wanted to love them, right? And now that love is gone, not vanished, not bitter, just quiet, just unavailable, and the spiral continues. Now they're playing old voice notes, reading messages you sent when you were still explaining yourself, still offering your heart with shaking hands. They're looking for cracks in your silence, hoping for an entry point, a way back in. But it's sealed. You're gone not in distance, but in decision. And that's what haunts them the most. The Stoics knew this power well. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "If someone is able to show me that what I think or do is not right, I will happily change, for I seek the truth. I seek the truth." But the truth is, most people don't want the truth. They want comfort. They want control. And your silence, it's not giving them either. You're not silent to hurt them. You're silent because explaining yourself to someone who never valued your words is a waste of your soul. You're silent because growth doesn't make announcements. It just shows up. In your peace, in your glow, in your refusal to engage with people who only understood your chaos, never your calm. So if they're spiraling right now, good. That's not your guilt to carry. That's not your burden to lift. That spiral, that's the consequence of their own actions catching up to them in a space they thought they'd never lose. Your heart. Say it with me and write it down in the comments. Let them spiral. I'm choosing silence. Let the world see that you've moved beyond explanations, beyond begging, beyond convincing people to value what they never appreciated in the first place. And stay with me, because next we're going to talk about what that silence is doing to their image of you. Spoiler alert, it's rewriting the story they used to tell themselves, and they're not the hero anymore. 5. Your silence is rewriting their version of you. The scariest part isn't losing you. It's realizing they never really knew you at all. At first, they had you all figured out. In their mind, you were predictable, safe, always available. They knew exactly what you'd do. If they pulled away, you'd chase. If they ignored you, you'd explain. If they hurt you, you'd forgive. That was the version of you they created, and it worked for them. It kept their ego warm. It kept them in control. But then something changed. You didn't react. You didn't reach. You didn't fall apart like you used to. And now that version of you, the one they depended on to always make the first move, is gone. Not slowly, not dramatically, just vanished, like a ghost in broad daylight. And the silence you left behind? It's not just confusing them, it's rewriting you. Because silence doesn't just leave a gap, it forces the mind to fill in the blanks. And the stories they're telling themselves now? They're not comforting anymore, they're terrifying. What if they were wrong about you this whole time? What if you were never weak, just patient? What if you didn't need them? You were just choosing them. And now that you're not choosing them anymore, they're realizing how much power you had the whole time. Let me give you a metaphor, my friends. Think of an actor playing the same role in a long-running show. The audience gets used to it. They think that's who they are. But then one day the actor leaves, walks away without warning. And now the audience is forced to wonder, Who were they really? Were we just watching a performance this whole time? That's what your silence is doing. It's shattering the role. They cast you in. Now they're left with questions. And questions are poison to the ego. They used to think you were easy to get back, that no matter how many times they left, you'd still be there when they came crawling back. But now they're questioning everything. Your silence has become a riddle they can't solve, a locked door they no longer have the key to. You're not just silent, you're unreachable. And that's different. That's powerful. Because now they're scrolling through your old photos, reading your old photos, reading your old messages, trying to find you again. But all they find are ghosts. Versions of you they took for granted, versions they never really appreciated. And here's the truth. The more silence you give them, the louder the doubt becomes. Were they ever really the prize? Were they just being tolerated? Did they actually matter to you, or were they just a chapter in your story? And that right there is the shift. The silence they once ignored has now become a spotlight, not on you, but on them, on their behavior, on their choices, on what they destroyed, thinking it would always be available. Seneca, the Stoic philosopher, said it best. The greatest revenge is to be unlike him who performed the injury. That's what your silence is doing. It's showing them you've evolved, that you're not bitter, you're just better. You're no longer the person who needed their attention to feel enough. You've become the person they were always afraid you could be, someone who can walk away and never look back. Because here's the thing they never understood. Silence isn't emptiness, it's transformation. While they're still stuck in loops of guilt and confusion, you're over here rebuilding quietly, stronger, wiser, sharper. And every time they check your page, every time they hear your name, every time they remember how easily you used to fold for them, they feel that shift. They wanted you to fall apart. You didn't. They expected you to beg. You didn't. They expected you to beg. You didn't. They counted on you needing closure. You gave it to yourself. Now they're the ones waiting, watching, wondering. Say this out loud and drop it in the comments. My silence is rewriting the story. Let it be known, not with noise, but with your absence, with your energy no longer on display, with your healing happening in silence and your worth no longer being explained. Stay close, because what's coming next, it's the part that breaks them the most. When they realize your silence wasn't a reaction, it was a rebirth. 6. When they realize you're not waiting, you're evolving. They thought you were pausing, but you were preparing. See, that's the lie they told themselves, that your silence was temporary, that your quiet was a phase, that you just needed a little time to cool off, to miss them, to crawl back. They thought you were holding your breath, waiting for them to finally come around. What they never realized is you weren't waiting. You were evolving. You weren't sitting by the phone. You weren't checking their profile. You weren't replaying every conversation in your head. You were rising, quietly, consistently, day by day, heartbreak by heartbreak. You were becoming someone they never prepared to meet, a version of you that doesn't need them at all. Let me paint the picture. Imagine a snake shedding its skin. It doesn't scream. It doesn't warn anyone. It just slips out of the old lair and leaves it behind. That's you. While they were hoping you'd stay stuck in the past, stuck in heartbreak, stuck in longing, stuck in silence, you were shedding every part of you that tolerated less than you deserved. And now they're starting to realize something terrifying. You're not coming back. Ha! That silence they thought was just a break has become a wall, a boundary, a transformation. You're not where they left you. You're not even who they left. They walked away from one version of you, and now you're becoming the version they always doubted you could be. And here's the part that cuts deep. They didn't fear losing you. They feared losing control over you. Because when they had control, they had comfort. But now? Now they're watching that comfort vanish. Your silence is no longer just quiet. It's a message. And it's saying, I'm good, I'm moving forward, and I'm not looking back. That kind of silence, it's haunting. They check your page, hoping to see sadness, but all they see is growth. They expect a sign that you're still waiting in the dark, but there's only light, your light. The glow-up they never thought would happen. The strength they didn't think you had. The power they underestimated every single time they walked away and expected you to follow. But you didn't, and that changes everything. Marcus Aurelius once said, "The best revenge is to be unlike your enemy." You're not getting even, you're getting better. You're not playing games. You're breaking patterns. You're not angry, you're aware. You finally see them for who they are. And more importantly, you see you for who you were always meant to become. And let's be honest, evolving in silence is the kind of flex they never recover from, because it forces them to question everything they believed about you. Were you ever really dependent on them? Were you ever really broken? Or were you just being patient with someone who didn't deserve your time in the first place? Now you're building, you're focused, you're healing, and you're doing it all without making a scene. That's what shakes them to their core. You're not chasing, posting cryptic quotes or seeking attention. You're just gone emotionally, spiritually, energetically, unavailable in every way they used to take for granted. And here's the truth. They're going to try and come back. Oh yes, they will. But it won't be because they love you. It'll be because they finally felt the weight of your absence, the cold echo of a presence they once had full access to. But by the time they come crawling back, you won't be waiting at the door, because the version of you they're looking for, that version no longer exists. Say it out loud and drop it in the comments right now. I'm not waiting, I'm evolving. Let it be known to the world, to them, to yourself, that your silence was never a retreat. It was the beginning of your transformation. And you better stay with me, because next we're going deeper. Because when they realize you're not coming back, what hurts them most is watching you become someone they no longer even recognize. 7. Your growth in silence is the loudest revenge. The best revenge is showing them they never broke you. They built you. Let that hit for a second, my friends. Because while they were out there thinking you were shattered, thinking they left you crawling through pieces of your own heart, you were building. Not loudly, not with drama, not with pity posts and desperate attempts to be seen. No, you were building in silence. And that silence, that's not weakness, that's warrior mode. See, they expected the usual pattern. They cause the pain, you react. They pull away, you chase. They disappear, you explain. But when you didn't, when you just vanished into your own peace, that messed with them more than any words ever could. Because now they're not watching you fall apart, they're watching you fall into place. Let me give you a visual. Imagine a garden that was once dying. The soil's dry, the plants are withering, the sun's too harsh, but no one sees the roots. No one sees that under all that brokenness, something is still alive, still growing, still trying. Then one day, out of nowhere, the whole garden blooms quietly, boldly, without warning. That's you. That's what your silence is doing. They thought the soil was dead, but you were just growing underground, out of sight, out of reach, and out of their control. And now, now they're watching. They're watching the glow up, the rise, the transformation. And it burns them more than your anger ever could. Because silence doesn't give them an explanation. It gives them results. It gives them evidence. Proof that the person they hurt didn't just survive. You evolved. The beauty of this, you didn't need revenge. You didn't need to expose them. You didn't need to announce your healing. You just lived. You turned your pain into fuel. And you stopped giving front row seats to people who only showed up to throw stones. Now they're stuck on the outside, watching, wishing, wondering how the same person who once gave them everything can now give them nothing. And here's where it hits even harder. You're not even doing it to get back at them. You're doing it for you. You're not growing out of spite. You're growing out of survival. You're rebuilding a version of yourself that doesn't shrink to fit someone else's comfort zone. Yet a certain Zeno of Citium, the father of Stoicism, once said, "Man conquers the world by conquering himself." And that's what your silence is doing. It's not about them anymore. It's about you, reclaiming your time, reclaiming your confidence, reclaiming your identity. You're in the gym now. You're journaling. You're focusing on your purpose. You're cutting off energy leaks. You're learning how to sit with yourself, how to rebuild brick by brick. No audience, no applause, just progress. Silent, steady, solid. And the ones who thought you needed them, they don't even recognize you anymore. And that's exactly the point. You didn't just silence the noise. You silenced the version of yourself that kept giving chances to people who weren't qualified to hold your heart. Now they're refreshing your page, hoping to see a crack, a slip-up, a post that proves you're still hurting. But all they see is distance, growth, strength, a presence that no longer includes them. And that's when the regret hits like a punch to the chest. Because here's the truth they never saw coming. Silence doesn't just rebuild you. It rewrites the story. They're no longer the main character. They're just a plot twist in a book that turned into a bestseller the moment you walked away. Say it with me and write it in the comments. My silence is my comeback. Let that affirmation live in your bones. Let it speak for you in every room they no longer get to enter. You don't need to prove your worth to people who gambled with it. You don't need closure from people who watched you break and felt nothing. You just need you, this new you, the healed you, the focused, powerful, beautifully silent you. In conclusion, your silence is not just absence, it's transformation. It's the loudest message you'll ever send without saying a word. Let them feel it while you rise in peace. If this spoke to you, like the video, subscribe for more, and share this with someone who needs the reminder.